Chapter 4 Findings 4.1 Artistic Process 4.1.1 Introduction. The purpose behind this chapter was to explore the process of analyzing the research conducted and to formulate the structure of the artistic concept. The intention behind the questionnaire used in the artistic process was to find the demographic for this project, determine the relevance of the Seoul film franchise amongst the local community, and to determine how the respondents' preferences could have been incorporated into the theater adaptation. 4.1.2 Demographic. From all of the respondents who filled in the questionnaire, 61.6% had been residing in Malta during the past 5 years, while other respondents had been residing in the UK, Australia, Canada, and the US during that time. From those who resided in Malta, 70.3% were between the ages of 18 and 25, and the rest were aged between 26 and 65. 67.6% of those who had been residing in Malta identified as female and the rest male. 4.1.3 Collective interest in genre. To determine the relevance of the horror genre and its level of appreciation, the respondents were asked to list 3 of their favorite horror films and to specify which horror subgenres they enjoy. The result indicated that the respondents had an overall appreciation of the horror genre, based on the variety of horror films they listed, such as Frankenstein and The Conjuring. They were also successful in identifying and differentiating horror subgenres, the most preferred of which, by 84.7% of the respondents, was psychological horror, followed by comedy horror, which 66.1% of the respondents preferred. The preference in psychological horror could be based on the commercial success the subgenre received during the 2010s, most notably through the Conjuring franchise, A Quiet Place, Get Out, and Hereditary. The respondents were then asked to follow the same steps when considering comedy films. The results also indicated a fondness for the genre, as was seen from the films they listed, including Tropic Thunder and A Fish Called Wanda. The majority of the respondents, specifically 61% of them, preferred the horror comedy subgenre, which was very ideal for this dissertation project since this was the subgenre the researcher aimed to incorporate in her project. 4.1.4 Relevance in local theater. After clarifying which horror and comedy subgenres the respondents preferred the most, the research conducted revealed that those who enjoy both the psychological horror and comedy horror subgenres could not recall watching any theater productions that featured these. The majority of these respondents had been residing in Malta during the past 5 years, which shows that there had been no recent local productions that featured these subgenres. This should not mean, however, that theater productions which incorporate psychological horror or comedy horror had never been produced locally. The majority of those who enjoy horror comedy subgenre, which is the most popular of the listed comedy subgenres amongst the respondents, stated that they did watch a theater production based on this subgenre. It should be noted that horror comedy is not the same as comedy horror, since horror comedy is more centered on comedy than horror, and vice versa. From those who watched these theater productions, 70% had been residing in Malta during the past 5 years. This determined that although the psychological horror subgenre had not been as prominent in Maltese theater productions, the local respondents were still keen on the possibility of watching it in a theater production. They also appeared familiar enough with the horror comedy subgenre and enjoyed watching it in a local theater production. 4.1.5 Relevance of the Seoul franchise. The Seoul film franchise was the basis of the Parody project produced as part of this dissertation. The reason for this was that the plot of Seoul was fairly straightforward, so as long as the researcher incorporated the main bone structure of the narrative, she could incorporate other elements she wished without the final outcome appearing unrecognizable when compared to its source. To determine whether the local respondents had a basic understanding and appreciation towards the film franchise, or at least one of the films, they were asked to determine which horror subgenre they associate the franchise with. 70.2% of the local respondents stated that the psychological horror subgenre best categorized the franchise, followed by 59.4% who felt that the gore subgenre was more appropriate. The local respondents were then asked whether they enjoyed the Saw film franchise, with the majority being 48.6% stating that they enjoy it, while 40.5% stated that they never watched it. From all the respondents who watched the films, 67%, making up the majority, enjoyed the first Saw film the most. From all of the respondents, the reverse bear trap was the most favored trap featured in the Saw film franchise, followed by the bathroom trap. This could be due to the fact that both of these traps were featured in the first Saw film, which was the most popular amongst the respondents. When provided a list of what could be featured in the dissertation project and which of those the respondents felt was most essential, 73% of the local respondents stated that eerie lighting and visuals were important components to incorporate, as well as creatively replicated soul traps, as stated by 59.5% of the local respondents. 4.1.6 Conclusion. Based on the data collected from this questionnaire, there was a demographic for this project which was based in Malta. This demographic was mainly made up of people aged 18 to 25 who enjoy watching the horror comedy subgenre, meaning that young adults were most likely to attend these types of performances. Knowing which age group was most likely to attend this theater production gave the researcher the opportunity to incorporate elements relevant to them that they could engage with further, such as by incorporating characters the same age as them. The feedback from the questionnaire also indicated that the first Saw film was the most preferred out of the rest in the franchise, making it the best film to reference when devising the parody project. This could also be seen from the fact that the respondents reacted most positively towards the traps that were featured in the first film. Some of these include the reverse bear trap and the bathroom trap, which should also be seen in the parody play.